people pleasing, because there's the word pleasing in there, people kind of make peace with being a people pleaser. But once it was reframed to me in the sense that when you people please, not only do you disrespect others, but you disrespect yourself, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want this to be me. I don't want to be that person that disrespects myself because I said yes to something when really I was supposed to say no. I don't want to be that person that says yes, I'm fine when really I'm not fine. I don't want to be that person that always overgives to others and then I feel some type of way afterwards, because when you give and it's coming from a genuine place, there's a happiness that you feel when you give, right? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Advice with Alex and Friends, the podcast. I'm your host Alex and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Novella.
Hi guys.
And we're going to get straight into it.
Ooh.
So,
I love an efficient woman.
Yes, of course. No lele. So, when it comes to, I'm going to use myself as an example. I know that I had a fear of being seen, and it's something I had to actively work on. And for those of you who are thinking, okay, what does that mean in terms of a fear of being seen? I think it's not showing up as your authentic self because you're afraid that if you show up authentically, people won't accept you.
Yeah.
And you can often, in my case, I was often downplaying my achievements, downplaying who I was in order to try and fit in. And ultimately, you can downplay all you want.
Yeah.
And the people who are going to accept you are going to accept you, and the ones who aren't
Absolutely.
going to do that. And even when people critique you about things, it's kind of like that's what Sally says about Susie says more about Sally than it does about Susie.
Yes.
That's what it's giving. Like, you know, sometimes you're just having a random conversation with somebody and they throw shade, which actually isn't shade. Shade is passive aggression.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me you don't like me with your chest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me that you're against what I'm doing with your chest as opposed to throwing shade at it. And you know, there were times when I was talking about something to somebody and they would say something and I would be like, I'd backtrack and backpedal, and it's like, no, actually, say it with your chest.
Yeah.
You have done this thing.
Yeah.
If that person doesn't like it, that's on them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for so long I guess the thing is, I was excelling, but I wouldn't necessarily share that I was always excelling.
Why?
Again, just a fear of being judged. I didn't want to be judged. And so even when I talk about starting this podcast, the way in which I show up now, the way in which I put myself out there now, I wouldn't have done that 5 years ago. There's absolutely no way I would have done it, because I was afraid. I was afraid of, you know, like blowing up and going viral on Twitter and people saying like negative things about, you know what people like, they'll nitpick, why is her hair like that? Why is her this like? You know, like all of
I am with you. Like, I definitely, I know.
I would
like,
be afraid.
Yeah, even now sometimes, like even when like clips go out and stuff, I'm like, there's like a sunken feeling in my belly. I'm like, oh God, he's gonna say that my edges aren't laid, or you know, my contour is off and stuff like that. Since I did this in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes to get ready. This is
not judge me. Yeah.
From in the morning when you went to work and you're still
this is the same makeup.
Exactly.
Because life. But yeah. I hear what you mean.
But it's it's deeper than that. I mean, that's kind of like surface level stuff. But I know that for me, in terms of like that fear, it shows up everywhere in your life. It shows up in your career. Yeah. It shows up in your friendships. It shows up in family, you know, with your family dynamics. It shows up, emotionally, like just everywhere.
Has it got better over the years, or has it got worse, or has it kind of stayed the same?
Oh, that's a good question. So I feel like it ebbed and flowed. I feel like I had moments where I was like, you know, so be it. Like, so, you know, there have been really big decisions that I've made in my life where I'm like, cool, I don't really care what you have to say. There's other times where I'm like, and I think it depends on how I feel about myself at that particular point in time. So if I'm feeling good about myself, then, you know, whatever people have to say doesn't really throw me off. But if I'm not feeling good about myself, then I feel like that can help. That doesn't help. So, but I know that like now, don't care. Honestly, don't care. I can really say that with my chest. because I know that I'm a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know that. Like, honestly, a prayer that I prayed last year, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of prayers that I prayed last year.
I love this.
God, let me see me how you see me.
I know.
And so, like, I felt like the prayer wasn't, you know, I wasn't actively, like, sitting on the prayer or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like, randomly, I was going through, like, my phone of, like, old pictures, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, Alex, like, I saw myself differently in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, all this time you had slept on yourself when you are
it.
You are it.
You are the it girl.
Girl. Like,
woman.
Let's not. All of that. Let's not sleep on ourselves. And I was like, I'm never doing that ever again.
Yeah.
Ever.
I feel like self-doubt is just so weird because it's... Sometimes I feel like I'm never going to get over this, like, constantly. It's like a constant battle. Mine is similar to yours in a sense where mine is saying no. Like, I really struggle because I'm like, if I say no, I always think about how the other person's going to feel rather than how I'm feeling. Like, it's just like, I've said no for this particular reason. I can't, or I don't feel comfortable doing that, or for whatever reason. And then I'm always like, and that for me is across the board, work, at home, with family. It's just like, even to the point of the nail shop, I am that person that sits at the nail shop where they've done your nails rubbish and I will say, fine, thank you.
That's people pleasing, and that's where I think actively I had to work on that last year. So these are all the things that you've mentioned, and the fear of being seen all come from being a people pleaser.
Honestly.
Because you learn early on that for whatever reason you didn't feel that you could show up authentically as yourself. Because for, you know, you wouldn't be accepted, or you were going to be a bother.
But this is the nail shop. Like, you're paying for a service, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, why are you so dumb? But the annoying thing is, I get the people pleasing part, but in other ways, I am very, very vocal. I am so vocal. Like, I am somewhere where I'm like, don't mess with me. Like, I know I can be very, very mouthy. But then it's so weird that in other instances, but I think you're right. I think it depends. I don't know if it's like hormonal in terms of where I am right now. Like, you know, if I'm feeling like, if I've had a bad day, maybe I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be a badass today. Like, anybody can get it. Anybody and everybody can get it. But you know, like, when you're like I don't know if you're like in a good mood or things sing, you like look at your nails and you're like, oh God, I hate the way she's done the shape. I hate the thingy. But like, I don't know. Then I'm like, okay, maybe like, okay, it's fine. But it's so weird, like in some circumstances where I'm like, no, I am very, very vocal. But in other circumstances, I'm like, no. I'm like, mute. Like, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's at the tip of my tongue.
So what goes through your mind where something is at the tip of your tongue, but you're not saying it?
Because I'm like, am I going to be a bother to this person? Is this going to create an argument? Sometimes saying yes to things sometimes is a lot easier than saying no. And sometimes...
Yeah, but easier for who?
But this is the thing. Well, in my head, I think it's easy because I'm like, I love an easy life. It's my favourite thing ever. But then I realise that it's not an easy life for me. It's an easy life for some. So I like making life easy for other people at the detriment of myself. Like, that's fine. And I would openly say that. But it's weird because then people would say to me and be like, oh, you never say like, oh, you need help or you need that or anything like that. You just kind of get on with it. Like, why is it you do that? And I'm just like, I just like an easy life. Like, if it's just me, it's easier. But it's just constantly that I don't know, toggling between that doubt sometimes. I'm like, why, Novella? Like, sometimes you can be so good, and then other times, 90% of the time, I am terrible. I am so terrible. And I sit down and I get upset with myself because it's only afterwards I'm like, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I do... Like, I'm pep talking myself, but I guarantee you that situation will happen 5 minutes later and I'll go and I'll do the exact same thing. I am the queen of like, nah, am I mad? No, come on. And literally that you could literally, you know when people say, right, oh yeah, reflect on the situation, maybe that's not me. I will literally hype myself in my bedroom, like, you know, like
how Issa Rae used to
yeah, that is literally me. That is literally me. Or you know, like when you were younger, you would pretend slam the door. You're like, I hate you. That is literally. And then as soon as like your mom comes upstairs and opens the door, you're like, is there something wrong? You're like, no, cool.
The door closed by
accident. Because you know that is how I live my life constantly. Fake slamming doors, basically. I'm so angry, like passive aggressively, I'm so angry, but I'm not gonna show people exactly how I feel about certain things.
Do you know what? I'm so glad that you mentioned passive aggression, because I remember somebody saying that to me. They called me out 5 years ago. They said, you're passive aggressive. And I was like, okay. And they mentioned why I was passive aggressive. It's like, there are things that are frustrating you, but you don't voice them. You don't voice your concerns. And it's like, well, why don't you do that? And I was like, well, I didn't think that my concerns needed to be voiced or worthy of being voiced, or you know, it's just like, oh, I'll just figure it out, which you always do, of course. But there is, what I realized was that I spent so much of my time thinking about the external that I was disconnected from myself. Like in the moment when something would be happening, like at work, there was a situation where we got locked in the lift, unfortunately, and we were in the lift for pretty much an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a lot. And in that time, I was boiling hot, but there was somebody who, like, you know, she was really hot, visibly hot. She was fainting, and I gave her my fan, but I really needed my fan in that moment. There's things like that I didn't even check in with myself. And then when we came out of the lift, you know, unfortunately, 2 of the ladies, they ended up having panic attacks, and, you know, people flooded to them. And then someone came up to me and said, am I okay? That's when that's when I had burst out crying, because I didn't even think about myself in that moment. And
why?
so, did you say why? I just saw other people going through something that I thought, I don't know, where they visibly presented to be more anxious or scared than I was. I thought that they were more importance than me, and that's a recurring theme in my life. In terms of
100%,
like, because I can, in my mind, I feel like I can handle something better, even in terms of loss, losing somebody, right? You know the relationship that you've had with that person, and so there are times where I've been like, well, I don't feel like I can show that I'm grieving right now. I need to show up for everybody else, and then I'll deal with my own later. And so in quiet. In quiet. And that's been a recurring theme for me. And so really learning towards the ending of last year, hey, you matter.
Absolutely.
And you need to spend time with yourself, because there were times where if you asked me right now what I was feeling, I couldn't tell you. But I could tell you what somebody else in the room, what I suspected somebody else in the room was feeling.
100%.
Always being on guard about
speaking to the crowd. You're speaking to the crowd, and it's like a natural, it comes a bit too natural, right? Worrying about other people and how they're feeling, and that you constantly sacrifice yourself and your happiness and your time. And it's weird, because it's always funny, because then I become a little bit of a hypocrite in that sense, because I'm always just like, I'm fine. And then I get to that point where it's just like, I'm not fine. I'm really not fine. And then I'm expecting kind of other people, but they're not going to do that, because I guess I'm speaking on behalf of you, but I'm guessing, as in when I say we, I guess we always put ourselves up there like, we are okay. And we can handle anything. People don't check in, really.
They don't.
And be like, you know what, something, and I can be very, very passive aggressive with that. like I can be like, even, I would give like a really thingy, even today, right? I was feeling very, very, things have been a lot, there's been a lot going on, and I felt very, very overwhelmed, and, you know, I broke down to my partner, and I was just like, and this was literally me crying, sobbing face, like, nobody's supporting me, nobody supports me, I'm always there. And so he was just like, well, you don't, no offense, but no one knows, Novella, because you never talk. He was just like, you expect to know everything about everybody else and kind of want to help everybody else, but then you don't talk, but then you expect people to know. So he called my bluff a bit, like saying, I hear your tears. I see all of this.
Yeah.
But you need to, you need to be more vocal
100%.
about it, because he was just like, if it was somebody else or thingy, you would stand up for them.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to kind of vocalize that for yourself.
No,
and it's understanding where that, I don't know where that comes from. Well, I kind of feel like I know where that comes from. But
no, I know where it comes from.
Yeah.
I know where it comes from for sure, definitely. But you're right. There is that, you're always, the word for it is being hypervigilant. You're always on the lookout for other people and what's going on with them. And as soon as somebody comes into the room, I can pick up if there's something different. Whenever I speak to somebody on the phone and they say they're fine, I'm like, no, you're not really fine. Like, I can do that for somebody else. And it's taken me a while to do that for myself. Like, Alex, are you actually okay? Are you actually fine? And it's okay if you're not.
You're very good at that.
I try.
You are really, really good. Like, even when we spoke today and I was telling you about, oh my God, the day I've had and everything, and like your first instinct was just like, I can provide you with food. And that's and people don't even understand that might be little for someone else, but that's massive, because even just the thought of like food or like cooking and stuff like that, like someone else taking that stress off of you when you're having an already stressful day is like that was like Alex giving me like £1 million, no joke. With how I was feeling today, that was literally like, I was just like, oh my God. I was just like, this is what I mean by being supported. People like Alex, she gets it.
But that's the thing, I think, because we try to be for others what we want for ourselves.
Yeah.
And when you have somebody who gets you, you're like, oh my gosh, you're my favourite person. I love
honestly.
that for us, right? But not everybody is like that. And I think it's almost a bit of a selfish way to think, to expect other people to know what's going on with you.
Word.
Like you just show up and you're a bit different.
Yeah.
And because you pick up in those differences from other people, you expect them to do the same for you. But you're not the centre of anybody else's universe. You're not going to pick it up. Respectfully.
Literally, it's so true. It's such a reality. You know what?
I ask, are you okay? And you're not okay, but you say okay in a different tone than what you'd normally say.
I'm like expecting you to pick that up.
And then you're like, hello?
Yeah.
Why did you not pick this up? And they're like, but I asked you and you said you were okay.
But I said it with like I stuttered when I said I'm okay. Like, you should have picked that up. I said, you asked me if I'm okay, and I was just like, oh, fine. Yeah. Like, you should have known that. Yeah. That's not how I usually say I'm fine. But you're right. It's not fair on other people. And that's why I say sometimes I know I can be definitely passive aggressive because I'm not quite sure how to vocalize how I'm feeling. So I do it by jabbing those closest to me and just taking stuff out on them unnecessarily. But
I think focusing on, so in terms of like tips and strategies for, I know we started talking about the fear of being seen, and ultimately we've come back to people pleasing tendencies as a whole and how they all show up in your life. Not asking for help, expecting people to know what's going on with you, putting other people first, focusing on the external instead of the internal. Again, the fear of being seen. These are all things that show up for you if you are a people pleaser. And I think people pleasing, because there's the word pleasing in there, people kind of make peace with being a people pleaser. But once it was reframed to me in the sense that when you people please, not only do you disrespect others, but you disrespect yourself. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want this to be me. I don't want to be that person that disrespects myself because I said yes to something when really I was supposed to say no. I don't want to be that person that says yes, I'm fine when really I'm not fine. I don't want to be that person that always overgives to others and then I feel some type of way afterwards, because when you give and it's coming from a genuine place, there's a happiness that you feel when you give, right? And I don't want to feel like I'm giving something and I feel resentment. And obviously in every single relationship, there's reciprocity, there's giving, there's taking, sometimes there's compromise as well, right? But that compromise shouldn't feel like a burden. It should be, and when you're communicating that to somebody, I think that's the thing as well, having the lingo. Hey, you've asked me to do something.
Yeah.
I'm not able to dedicate an hour, but I can give you 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take some time away from what I'm doing, but 30 minutes only, and I'm going to go back. And it's having that language and being able to, having those boundaries and remembering that boundaries, because I think some people are like, when they're communicating boundaries or when they're talking about boundaries, they make it seem like it's a wall. Oh, well, I'm going to treat them how they treat me. That's not how it is.
That's not a boundary.
Boundaries are you setting the rules for your life to allow people in, and you have to start with having boundaries for yourself. Do you uphold your own boundaries? When you say, oh yeah, do you know what, tomorrow I'm going to go to the gym at 6 a.m, do you actually go?
Yeah.
When you say, oh, do you know what, I'm going to say no to the third round of drinks when I go out with my friends, do you actually uphold that?
Yeah.
When you say, do you know what, I'm not going to have takeaway this week because I want to, you know, eat healthier.
Yeah.
When you say, do you know what, this month I'm not going to go out to as many functions because I want to save some money, I want to tighten up. Do you respect your own boundaries? Now, if you don't respect your own boundaries,
other people won't.
Other people won't. That's it.
Yeah.
And so people get angry with others when really the frustration should be with yourself because you didn't uphold your own.
Yeah.
You know?
And I always respect other people that do hold that, you know, that put up their boundaries and like, you know what, I don't feel comfortable. I'm like, you know what, I love that. I need to do more of that. And then you just struggle sometimes to kind of learn and kind of do the exact same for yourself.
Yeah.
It's a really hard one.
It is a hard one. And do you know what? Sometimes with people who stand firm on their boundaries, I think for me, there have been times where I've obviously admired people who stand firm on their boundaries, but there's also been times when I've felt frustrated with people who stood firm on their boundaries, because I'm like, well, if it was the other way around,
I would do it.
But also there's this expectation sometimes that you would do something because people know that you don't respect your boundaries. So they know that they can say to you no. And that you're going to say yes.
Yeah,
and
it feels
so
vice versa.
There is always that shift that comes when you actually do start to say no. And, you know, I think for a lot of people are saying that they're going through change, or, you know what, I've realised that maybe my friendship circle is changing, or that my relationship with my family is changing, or how I'm perceived at work is changing.
What do you think is the hardest boundary to set at work, family, friends?
I think it's the hardest to set it with people
closest,
but the people that you never say no to. So if you never say no to, I'm going to rephrase this. For me, the people that I've found it hardest to say no to were the people that I put on pedestals in my life.
Absolutely.
I realised that there was an imbalance in the relationship, and that for whatever reason I'd put them on a pedestal. And the last couple of years I've been actively working on removing people from pedestals. They bleed, I bleed. You know, we're all human beings at the end of the day. I shouldn't see anybody as higher than myself.
Absolutely.
But when I did have them on pedestals, I found it hard to say no to them because there was a fear. Ultimately it comes from fear. I'm afraid that I will distort the relationship. I'm afraid that they won't want to be around me as much anymore. I'm afraid that I'll be called, you know, bad or selfish, or be perceived as anything other than how I want to be perceived. Again, going back to the fear of being seen, right? And so that's why I feel like people fall into the category of people pleasing for various reasons. And part of the reason was for me that I didn't want to be perceived as being bad, as being selfish,
being rude,
being uncooperative, any of those things, when actually if you perceive me that way when I say no to you, that's your problem. And also, when you ask me something, if you don't accept my no, then it wasn't a request, it was a demand. You know, and I think that there's that aspect of things as well. And I think therapy really taught me that, you know, there were so many things I'd beat myself up over, and it was like, no, actually you were wronged in this situation. You can't carry the weight of that. And I was carrying the weight of that as a form of control, because I'm like, I can't control that person. I've made peace with that. But what can I do to control myself? And so healing for me looks like putting myself in those situations where I do have to speak up, where I do have to say no. And typically I'll try to just say no on its own in a complete sentence, and then if I get pushed back, I'll say no again, and then if somebody explains to me why, I'll explain it why as best as I can. But it's not always it's not always easy, is it?
It's not always easy. And for me as well, what I've learned over the years as well is that sometimes it can actually bring resentment. So, and naturally, your relationship sometimes can change. And I've seen that where it's just like, sometimes the dynamic of maybe how you used to be versus how you are now, and when you're looking back and you're like, why has the dynamic of our relationship changed? And it's just because of that. You're like, well, actually, like, you made a great point where you were like, you know, if you couldn't respect my no, that meant that it was a demand, like you were demanding that from me. And as well, it's looking back at situations, because I have this really real thing where sometimes, you know, you look back at situations and you're like, I struggled sometimes to be like, I always found that because maybe that person, I don't know, had a more emotional response to something, that they were right. And it's only afterwards, you know, you sit back and you're like, no, actually, I stand by what I did. And what I hate is when people make you feel guilty about a decision that you've made. You might not agree with it. You might not have done that if you were me. That is you. But what you cannot, and what I'm learning to do, is saying, you can't make me feel bad for the decision that I've made. I think that's unfair.
Yeah.
And I think it's being strong enough to be like, especially as adults now, we're like women in our 30s. Like it's not speaking to me like I'm 20, like in my, I'm not going to say 21, but like I'm a child, should I say. It's about speaking to me as an adult, and I make adult decisions based on me. Your boundaries is different to my boundaries. You might say yes to everything. That's how you deal with it. I can't. I don't have the mental capacity to do that. So I think it's as well understanding and taking a seat back and say, actually, and that's why I've learned as well now to kind of let things go sometimes. It's just like, you know what, I'm not even going down this road with you, because this seems like a you issue. It's not an issue for me, so it seems like a you issue, so I just end up leaving it. But then you see the dynamics in your relationships change ever so slightly, and you're like, you either start holding back certain information, or you just see things change. Things
do change. The second that you decide that you're going to put yourself first, naturally things will change, and it will be from people who benefited from you when you weren't sure of yourself. And so, in terms of what I would do to make my future self proud, it's continuing to make that choice every day to be certain of who I am. There was a period of time when I didn't know who I was, and I felt so lost. And when you're lost, you're susceptible to like people's opinions of you, and just honouring others and not focusing on yourself. And I make a conscious effort to tap into me and what I want, and articulating that. And if you don't respect what I want, then you don't need to be around me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't need to be around me. It's absolutely fine. It's not by force for anybody to be anything. Like, it's okay. You stay in your corner, I'll stay in mine. We
100%.
There's no beef, there's no malice. I don't feel some type of way towards you. It's okay. I'm flourishing and thriving here. I hope you're flourishing and thriving in your corner. Yeah. And mine, just echoing on to what you said, mine is just like not feeling bad about things. I'm still learning a lot about that, recognizing that your feelings do count and matter, and nobody's going to care about your feelings and emotions more than you are. So it's recognizing that sometimes, you know, people might make you feel bad about certain situations, but if you're confident, you know you're not a bad person, you know that wasn't meant in. I always believe, you know how if you say something or you do something, you know how that was intended. And for me, if that comes from a good place, nobody else is going to make me feel bad about that. You might have perceived that. Perception is a massive thing. You've perceived it one way, you've perceived it another, but just trying not to beat yourself up and feeling bad about things that you really shouldn't be. I agree. So, do you have a fear of being perceived? Let us know in the comments down below. Do you suffer from people pleasing tendencies? I think a lot of our listenership probably does. What are you doing to overcome it? Especially this year, we're saying, we're aligning with all of our goals. What are you going to do to overcome it? We're being really transparent here. and make that choice every single day. And if you slip up, which sometimes you will, you can be like, okay, do you know what?
Give yourself grace.
Give yourself grace. I think that's the biggest thing that I would say to a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace, because nobody else is going to give it to you, one.
No.
And two, you deserve it. And
Absolutely.
when you give yourself grace, then you're actually able to be like, you know what? What was I trying to do here to be perfect?
Yes.
Can you even be perfect?
I know.
No. Okay, it's fine. So let's remove that pressure. And guys, if you're not following us already, follow, like, share this with your people pleaser friends. Maybe you're the confident friend and you're tired of your people.
Add them in the comment. Just
add them. Yeah, add them.
Love you, sis. Love you, sis, but this is for you.
This is for you.
Just a little bit of advice to help you on your way.
Exactly. So guys, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.